Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustavson and Barry Smith.
Hey guys, hope you're doing great. It's Paul Gustavson, and here we are. We're about to start a brand new season, and I wanted to just jump on this one right here. I'm going solo today. I'm flying solo, but listen, we're gonna have a bunch of great guests here during the course of the season, and I want you to dial in on this conversation today that I wanted to share with you, and so excited about this. But first and foremost, I want to just thank my co-host partner, Rick Morris. He's taking a little bit of a break. He's been doing this for 8 years plus, doing different podcasts and broadcasts. And Rick, thank you so much. And you're still a part of this, still producing all the elements to it. And thank you for that. All right. So again, I'm flying solo today, but I wanted to share a message with you that I think is pretty powerful and really get you kind of geared up for the season ahead, right? I love this time of year, right? When I was growing up, I couldn't wait, not necessarily for school, but the new TV season, right? Remember the new shows that would come on and you just couldn't wait to see what was happening? Well, here we are. We got a brand new season for you, and we've got some great things lined up. And I wanted to share a little bit of stuff here that I think will add value to you. So here it is. Lean in on this. I want you to capture your thoughts, your notes, share back to me. Look for me on all the social media feeds, and just love to hear from you. So here we go. Breaking average. I mean, there it is. You can see it right there. That is a mantra that I am trying to live by. Look, I am an average person, but I can break average, right? We all have that opportunity to step forward and do something a little different, to break the status quo, to not get so ingrained in the old way of doing things. So the first question I have for you is, what are the things that you're stuck doing? What are the things that you have been doing that, you know what, you just keep doing it? And it's not that it's bad, but it's not that it's breaking average, right? It's kind of average. And we all have those things. We all have our little idiosyncrasies and habits and behaviors and things that we just do that become habits that aren't necessarily good. But we get a chance to break average. We get a chance to do some things here to add some value. But what are those struggles and challenges that you have? Or maybe you don't even see them as challenges. You just, it is what it is. And that's the first myth I want to talk about. It is what it is. I think that's a myth. Now, I've said it myself. There are times where I it is what it is. And I'll tell you a funny story. All right. So years ago, my wife and I took a cruise, not too long ago, actually. And there's a long story to it. I'll keep it short for you. But what happened was our flights were delayed. And we didn't even think we were going to make the cruise. But we found a way, and that's in itself is a miracle. But we found a way to get down to Miami to catch our cruise ship and get on that ship. But here's what happened. When we got on the plane, we got there just a few hours before the last time that you could board, but our bags never made it on the plane. So they told us at the airport that they weren't going to come till 11:30 at night. Well, that was going to be way too late. So we just said, you know what, we'll just wear what we've got. And we jumped on that ship. In fact, they didn't even let us on the ship initially because there were no bags. We just had a carry-on bag. That's it, just a little knapsack for both of us. And so we had to say, look, check the manifesto. We're on there. We're there. And sure enough, we were. And they let us on. And they kept questioning, like, where are your bags? Where are your bags? And it was funny because they said, hey, look, we'll comp you for all your clothes to wash, to launder. And I said to them, well, I'm one layer deep. That's all I got. And it is what it is kind of the mantra that I was taking. But the reality was that there was so much more. There was opportunity right in front of me. And it started off with just kind of going into little shops. Now, this was an Italian cruise ship. I didn't have my swimsuit. That was on that bag that was on an airplane that was going to land 11:30 later that night. So I needed a swimsuit. I wanted to go. It was hot. I wanted to go by the pool. So I went to the Italian cruise ship shops and asked for a swimsuit. And the lady kind of smiled and she said, over there in that corner. I went over there. No, not going to do those, right? Speedos, not going to wear those. So I said, look, is there another shop that's got like swim trunks? And she said, yeah, there's a gift shop, one level down that's got a gift. They may have some swim trunks. So I went down there and sure enough, they had swim trunks. I was excited, but they were Italian cut style, right? So there's a lot of thigh, right? Back in the 70s, that was the in thing for shorts. But you know what? It's the best I could do. So I got the red shorts, and they're a little, the sizing is definitely different for Italian cruise ships and clothing. But nonetheless, I got them. I was able to enjoy the pool side and concert shirts. There was a bunch of bands playing on the cruise, so I got some concert shirts. I was fine. I was fine. It wasn't. It is what it is, right? I realized that the opportunity was right in front of me, and I just need to look for it. So when we get caught up with it is what it is thinking, we lose the opportunities that are right in front of us. In fact, there may be greater opportunities in front of us because we have what we think we have limited choices. But the reality is that there's a lot of choices out there. So look for those options and choices that you see. They're there. Just look for them. And there's a great little mantra that I love by John Boyd. Now, John Boyd was an Air Force pilot and instructor and game changer for the military. And he came up with something called the OODA loop. It's observe, orient, decide, act. Now, this is about 50 years after the Wright brothers invented flight, right? So think about all the progression of what took place when the Wright brothers began to learn how to fly. Before they even flew, there were people who were saying it just can't happen. It is what it is. No, man's never going to fly. Man will never fly. In fact, Orville himself wrote a letter to his sister, Catherine, and said, I don't think it's going to happen for another 50 years. They were just failing it was a failure after failure after failure at Kitty Hawk. And they just, at one point, they were ready to just, all right, pack it up. Let's go. Let's go back to Dayton. Let's go back to the bike shop and do what we need to do. No, Catherine wrote back and said, hey, don't give up. I believe in your vision. I believe in your dream. You can do it. I got the shop. You guys keep doing what you're doing. And they did. They kept fighting through it. And obviously we know it, right? They broke it. 50 years. Think about that. He said it won't happen again for 50 years, but yet they persevered. They didn't get fallen into the trap of it is what it is. But 50 years later, that's when John Boyd came up with this great tactic that you and I can use every single day called observe, orient, decide, act. Observe, see what's around you. Don't make any emotional decisions here, right? Decision comes later. Observe what's around you. What's around you? It's not so bad. You're on the ship. You may not have your bags, but you're on the ship. Orient. All right. Look around. Position yourself. In basketball, we call this pivoting. We've heard that term maybe way too much with COVID. But hey, look, it's a good term. We do need to pivot. We need to kind of look and see what else is around us. Because once we start to see it, we see our options. So you take in the data, that's situational awareness, observation, orient, see what you've got, see what plays you can do. It's kind of like a Jason Bourne kind of approach. And then, and only then, do you decide. Observe, orient, decide. Now you've got your options, you've gone through it, and you just look at the best outcome. You look at it from a standpoint of, well, what is it that I ultimately want? What's the hope that I really, really want? That's what the Wright brothers did. They actually followed the OODA loop, and they didn't even know what it was called at that time. Boyd had to come up with that term 50 years later. All right. So they looked at the options of what they had. They made decisions on that, but they didn't stop there. And this is where the problem is for most leaders. Most leaders, including myself, where I've struggled the most. Maybe I've observed well, maybe I've oriented well, maybe I've even made some great decisions, but I didn't act on those decisions. Where have you fallen short in that area? Be honest with yourself. I'm looking at some things that I thought I was going to do this year, 2022. Decisions that I made. great decisions, best of intent. But you know what? Best of intent doesn't mean I'm best of action. Action is where it's all at. So once you decide you got to act, I like how Daniel Hammond, he was talking to me in April, and he says, it reminds me when we were talking about the OODA loop, it reminds me of the five frogs on a log. He goes, four frogs decided to jump. Then he asked, do you know how many were still left on the log? And he said, five. They decided to jump, but they didn't. It's not until you jump and not until you make that act, not until you move forward. So the act part is so critical. Once you make that decision, don't just rest on it, wait on it. No, act. Go forward with it. Act. You know what? You may fall. You may falter. The Wright brothers, once they acted, they made some, gosh, I got a book called The Wright Brothers Failures, and it's amazing. The number of failures that they had. Edison, right? Failed on the light bulb. I don't know how many different times. But they don't see it as failure as an end state. They see it as a learn state. So don't look at failure as an end state. Look at it as a learn state, because every time you learn, you get better. Apollo 13, my father's classmate, Jim Lovell, was a pilot as an astronaut on that. If you haven't seen the movie, you got to watch Apollo 13, and you can see the examples of the OODA loop throughout that movie. And you see Lovell, he's out there and down on the ground, Cape Canaveral and the crew, both in Florida and Houston, they figure out a way to help those boys get back. Now, they never landed on the moon. They went around the moon. They never landed on the moon. So it was deemed as a successful failure. I love that term, successful failure. Why was it called a successful failure? Well, it was a failure because their mission was to land on the moon, but that wasn't their greater mission. The greater mission was to bring those boys back. The greater mission was to collect information, data, knowledge, experience, and come back and share that with others. And that's exactly what they did. And so they made us better through their failure. And some of those guys went back out to space. I don't know if any of them landed on the moon or not, but nonetheless, they made a huge difference. When we step forward, when we get stuck with it is what it is thinking, boy, we're just going to stay on the log, but we got to jump off the log. So go through that OODA loop. So we're going to be talking a lot this new season, about making those decisions of moving past what it is thinking, and stepping forward. We got some great stories to share with you. We'll have some fantastic interviews. I can't wait to share some of these interviews. And here's the other thing. I'm so excited about this. Maybe you may think of this as self-promotion. It's really not. I'm trying to add value to you guys. I appreciate every one of you, whether you're watching or listening. All of our friends who have been a part of this thing, we care about you guys, and we want you to break average. So one of the things I've been working on for a while, long while, some of you may know this, maybe some of you don't. Been working on this book called Imagine, and it's the surprising truth about hope and 12 powerful ways to invent the future. So I share some stories like the Wright brothers. They're in here. There's other stories, and I'm not going to unpack all those today, but I do share the OODA loop framework throughout, right? So how do you imagine? How do you leverage the most powerful tool that you have? Your imagination. I really believe it is the most powerful tool that we have. And it's also the most limiting tool, because our imagination can keep us. It can create doubt, fear, worry, anxiety, apprehension. If it's not dialed right, if it's not tuned right, if we're stuck with the mist, like it is what it is thinking, then our imagination is going to take us off the rails. But let's get back on the rails. Let's get on track. Let's talk about how your imagination makes a huge difference. So the 12 factors in here, there's actually a 13th one. So it's a bonus one at the end in the appendix. But we'll hit some of these things over the course of this season. So I'm not going to There's a lot. I mean, you can see it's got some thickness. I've tried to thin it down a little bit. And thanks to all those that have been helping contribute, we'll get some bonus materials that I just didn't put in the book that I'll put on the website. But I love this idea, and the idea of imagination. You'll hear me share this again in the future. The idea of imagination. When I was 13 years old, I'm watching the Winter Olympics, 1980. So now you know a little bit of how old I am. 1980, February. And everybody remembers the ice skating, the hockey team. Fantastic. And we've talked about it here on this podcast. But there's a couple other sports that I was really interested in. One was um, speed skating. I thought that was pretty cool. And then also snow skiing. I love skiing. I began to ski a few years earlier, so I really enjoyed watching that. And there was two brothers who were competing in different events, skiing on the mountain at Lake Placid. I forget the name of the mountain. And one was the slalom. And I love the slalom. If you have never watched skiing, there's the giant slalom. There's this downhill, which is cool. They're going super fast, dangerously, deathly speeds. They're all fast, by the way. And then there's the giant slalom, which is kind of like the downhill, but it's super wide slalom. You can kind of see where to go, right? It's like moving a ship a little bit. You know where you're turning. Slalom is amazing because you're just scooting through these slalom gates super fast, super quick, and you can't make any mistakes. So Ingemar Stenmark, he's a Swedish skier, and if you can't tell, I got a little bit of Swedish in my blood, so I was kind of interested in him, but I was more interested in our USA brothers, Phil and Steve. Twin brothers, not identical, but they looked identical to me. And those guys had a chance, especially Phil. Phil had a chance. He was actually at one point first place, right? When they get to the finals, they have 2 runs. And if you got a good time in both of those things, you may get a chance to medal. And he had a chance to medal. So he's in first place. They go to a commercial. They're going to come back, and we're going to see a second run. And right before the second run, they have an interview. And I'll never forget it. ABC Sports, they conduct this interview. They're with Phil Mayer on the mountain right at the starting gates. And they say, hey, what's it like right here? We're up here at the top where you get started, where you start skiing. What's it like before you ski? What goes through your mind? What do you do? And Phil says, well, the first thing I do is I visualize, I imagine myself skiing all the way down from the starting gates, all the way through every gate, every slalom, what I'm going to do, the conditions of the snow, the shape of the snow, my energy, my breath, everything, all the way down to the bottom until I get to the finish. I imagine if I don't ski that race before I run it, I won't have my best run. Now that just affected me. 13 years old, the first time I'd ever heard an athlete talk about how he visualized and imagined the experience of what he was about to partake. And that was phenomenal to me. And it just kind of caught my attention. And that's what I opened the book with. And can't wait for you to learn more about a little bit of that story. My connection, actually, I connected with Phil Mayer just recently, beginning of this year. So I'll share a little bit about that too. But we're going to talk a little bit about imagination, the OODA loop, and things of that sort. And I want you to kind of stay plugged in. I want you to get focused. But I'm going to put out one question and one call to action for you today as we wrap up this very short podcast. Again, we'll have some special guests throughout the year. You guys are going to love this. And I can't wait to hear from you. All right. So first thing, I want you to think about, go back, rewind the tape and think about, imagine what you've done, what you've accomplished. Think about how that imagination has been a power tool for you, a high power tool, right? Where you casted that vision, where you thought out that dream, where you set that goal, and you begin to imagine yourself reaching that goal. Now, maybe the process for how you got there, right? So Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind. He doesn't say start with the end in mind and then figure out every step you're going to take along the way. No, he says start with the end in mind. And here's what happens. There's something at the base of your skull called the RAS, the reticular activating system. I talk about it in the book. And once you set your goal, your vision, your dream of where you want to go, what you aspire for, then things begin to appear. observation, OODA loop here, right? You begin to see the things that you need to take advantage of what it is that you want. The Wright brothers essentially had this. Catherine Wright was one of their supporters. In fact, I don't call them the Wright brothers anymore. I call them the Wright trio, because if it wasn't for Catherine Wright, we wouldn't have known who the Wright brothers were. But that RAS, that reticular activating system, and shout out to Mark Batterson for highlighting this in his book, The Circle Maker. That's where I learned about that. But it made it connected the dots for me. I get it. I got it. Right. So once you have this RAS and you've activated, it's like a radar system. It's looking for those things. It's attracted to the things for which you need to be able to support where you are going. And it's powerful. It is so powerful. It's how God created us. And whatever your theology, ideology is, look, I'm not going to dive into a biblical perspective, although I am a person of faith, just so you guys know. But what I'm really interested in is the common thing that we all share, independent upon what your faith, religion, culture is. We all are humans with the same physiology and how our brains are wired and worked. There's something in common there. So let's explore that together just for a little bit. That's what this book does. I just want to have some fun on the podcast, kind of exploring these topics, including the RAS. And again, shout out to Mark Batterson for highlighting this idea of RAS in his book, The Circle Maker. So anyway, so the first thing is I want you to go back and think about some of the things that you've imagined that have come to fruition. One or two. All right. I'm sure maybe you've got 100 ideas, or maybe a half a dozen really big dreams that you've accomplished. I don't care. 2 or 3 may be significant enough. Guys, again, that's number one. Think about some of the things that you have imagined that have come to fruition. It's pretty powerful. Now, here's the reality. I know that some of the things that you've imagined that weren't so rosy, so shiny, some of the doubt and the fear, some of those things came to light too, didn't they? Right? Some of the things that you really feared that you imagined actually came to fruition. So I understand that. I've been there too. I've seen some things where I really feared and doubted, and that fear and doubt, I saw evidence of it. And what happened there? So we're going to talk a little bit about fear and doubt and why that sometimes takes place and how we can replace it. Some of the patterns that we can build, which is based on some of the habit ideas that you've heard in the past. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's going to be great. We're going to have some good conversations with good people. So the second item is this, right? So first one is I want you to think about things that you've imagined that have come to fruition. The second one is, hey, look, today, and tomorrow. Now, your past, you can think back on your past a lot and get stuck over there. Don't get stuck on the past. What I want you to think about is, what is it you aspire for now? What are some of those dreams and goals and aspirations that you have? What are some of your moonshots? I love that concept, the moonshots that John F. Kennedy brought to play for us in the 60s, right? If he hadn't cast a moonshot vision, we may have never had man on the moon, at least in the time frame that he committed to. Now, he never saw physically a man land on the moon, but he set the vision, and through the Gemini and Mercury and Apollo program, we finally put man on the moon. It's amazing. We haven't put man on the moon since. We need another moonshot. I know we got a Mars shot vision, maybe with Elon Musk, but we need, what's your moonshot? So I want you to think about some of your moonshots. Here we are about to land the plane in 2022. We got a brand new season here, September. We're rolling in with all these brand new podcasts, and you've got an opportunity to make an impact, to finish and close out 2022 in such a strong way that makes 2023, you're setting up the stage for that. What do you imagine? Whether it's the end of this year or next year, why wait till January 1st to cast your resolutions? And I'm not a resolution guy. I just want you to cast that big vision. Start with the end in mind. What do you want 2023 to do for you? Cast that vision. Maybe they'll set the RAS. What is it that you imagine? All right. So those two things, think about what you've done that you've imagined that has come to fruition, and think about what you imagine next. What do you imagine next? All right, guys. Thanks for watching the Breaking Average podcast or listening to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm super excited. And again, we've got some great friends that are going to be joining us, familiar faces, and glad you're here. Connect with me. And check us out on our site, breakingaverage.com. Just go to www.breakingaverage.com. All right. Catch you later.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestones Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.